So how do we as men explore our dark side when that involves women? That involves female objectification. That involves maybe over-sexualized behavior. Maybe that involves some sense of misogyny or locker room talk, the taboos of our culture. I'm going to tell you this. They are necessary for you men, and you don't need to be a bad dude doing it. Part of that is being a great man, a good man that is respected in society and does well in society. So let's listen up. All right, we are on our Sunday call, and we're talking about the need for misogyny, objectification, all these things that we don't want to talk about. And this is like a huge thing that I want to include in my interview series, especially with interviewing women, because socially we have this thing where we're not supposed to be rude to anybody, especially sexually. That's just like toxic. And don't get me wrong, like, so I want to have this discussion. Sex can be immensely harmful to both men and women in many ways, and especially when objectification comes through, especially when pain. And so this is not a denial of that. I want to have a full discussion on that, and that's also the point of a lot of these interviews. So when it comes down to things like objectification, locker room talk, misogyny, being that kind of scumbag sort of guy, we all steer away from it as men, but whenever you get men together, they will tend to talk about these things, right? And I've had men's groups since, for 14 years basically, and they always talk about it. This doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong, but they always talk about it. But here's also why they talk about it, is because there's a side of when you're with a woman, whether you're just sexually interactive casually, whether you're in a committed relationship with her, whether you're just talking even sometimes with women, where that is necessary, where the objectification, where the misogyny is a good thing. And let's define this. So first off, by misogyny, I'm probably misusing the word. I don't mean hating women, but what I mean is there's times where you're dominant. There's times of where you do speak your mind. There's times of where you may say something that sounds like you hate women or whatever. And you might have anger towards a woman, but the hating of all women, it's not really what I'm going for. But objectification, seeing somebody as a sex object. So here's the interesting thing, is then we get this comment from the whole man side of thing. And man, there's so much that I want to talk about with this, like the sluts versus studs thing. And so there's so much to it, and it's not easy to answer. But I'm going to say this is I believe a lot of people get it wrong on both sides. So on the man side of it, they're going like, well, women dress this way. Well, women say this. I dated a feminist and she has to choke and slap me and blah, 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 blah. And then we further the discussion down a little bit more with some guys who have some experience, and this is what's necessary. And then let's say, well, look, that woman chose for you to have that experience. Or maybe you'll have the dialogue with women and they'll say like, look, we don't mind being a slut, a lady in the day, but a whore in the bed type thing. But for the man we decide to experience that with. And that is one step down the perspective. But then it goes even further, where a man's dark side, so to speak, or a man's misogynistic side, a man's objectifying side, a man's taking side, should be evolved separately also from women. And we need to be wise with this, because in an unevolved conversation, which is what we're having about with the sexes now, even at the higher levels, it's very rare. I really liked my podcast with Sophie Josephina, because I thought we started to touch into a good spot where I don't get to with women, is that when we are talking about this, it might be something like, oh man, women just want to have that choice, or women just want to gift that to somebody. But there also needs to be a time for men and women to separate and explore those dark sides. To explore those dark sides doesn't mean that you're a bad person. To explore those dark sides is a personal exploration in yourself, and not an exploration in yourself that is based on society. Society gives us judgment on these. And personally, we also feel judgment. This is interesting. So again, in a lot of the interviews I do, when we talk about abuse or sex abuse, and I know that might not be something you want to discuss, is socially, there's a consequence that you might feel with that in your relationship in the world and the healing from that and so on. There's also a social consequence for the blame and who may have victimized you. So the healing and the blame, two different things. But then also there's a personal journey, which is very different, right? And that personal journey is ultimately going to be the one that matters most. At first, the social stuff, but later on it gets to this other stuff. So when we get to this objectification of women, There absolutely needs to be a time for men to be able to have that. They're going to have that. That doesn't mean that men are bad. That doesn't mean that men are designing the world and the patriarchy to kill our culture. That does mean that when men are in scarcity and they're afraid and they think that women are going to blame them and judge them and they think they're doing something wrong, that we well move into that. That we move into that scarcity mindset, that we move into that force, that we move into that control. And that's where I think it can be potentially socially harmful. But at the same time, I think a lot of currently the social harm, the last 10 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, the social harm that has been done to women in terms of sex doesn't come from these communities of men talking. It actually comes from men who aren't talking in these communities that embody some of the values that these communities of men talking that may be saying bad things do or say, but those communities don't have men that actually do them. Basically, to make things black and white, the pickup industry created men that were weaker, not stronger, that could not carry these things out with women, but men who weren't involved in the pickup industry were doing those things. Same with the red pill, same with MGTOW and all this other stuff. So how this gains relevance today is, this is interesting. We're talking about breaking up, right? Nobody wants to do a breakup bad. Nobody wants to do it poorly. And the worst things I see about breakups are this, is that, dare I use the word, we can't handle our dark side. So a lot of times people will implode relationships. They won't communicate with them. One, because of lack of experience in doing it, because you only go through a few major breakups in your life, right? But there's no women talking about this. So, man, when I talk to divorced guys, it's almost the same story when it's a female introduced divorce. There's like her showing some doubt, the man trying, and then the woman doing stuff to then sabotage the relationship, making it impossible to continue. And then the man has to leave rather than communicating about it. A lot of that is allowing that dark side not to be able to be voiced, being afraid of it, dancing between two archetypes of I'm the good person, I'm the bad person, I'm the good person, I'm the bad person, when really you're both, and the integration of that is very difficult. But then with men, also the same thing. It's like a man, in this case, trying to communicate who he is and what he is or what he wants, which is like, man, I can't be committed to you, that simple. I can't have a relationship with you. But at the same time, that could mean a lot of things, right? But part of that was like, she built up an image or what he thinks is she built up an image of him being this really great, nice guy, and he just couldn't be this bad dude. And I'll tell you this, when we put those expectations on each other, like with women, there's the Madonna whore complex. With men, I don't know what it would be, the all-American dude, and then the trashy dude or whatever, the good guy, nice guy, bad guy, whatever you want to call it. When you have those two things and men are seen that way, and we can't be seen as the total package, it can limit us as well. So I think this dialogue of, one, you can be bad. You can be bad. You can be, if you're a woman, you can be a lady and you can be a hoe, but they're not two different people. It's your job. It's not that you're both of those and you have to find the balance in between them. It's more that you need to bring them closer together. So when one acts on extreme of the other, it doesn't pull away from the norm so much. And so when a man, he has his dark side, his bad boy side, his player side, whatever that is, it should be integrated closer into the social ideal of what he is. And when we can hold those things together, it doesn't move as far away from the norm. Again, an application for this, it's much harder, but this is like what we talk about. This is like the real point of what our calls are for and what our community is for. And just really quickly, I hear this all the time when it comes to porn addiction and sex acts and sexual past and sexual trauma. It's like, oh my God, I'm this person. You are that person. You are that person that either those things happened to, or you did them, or you like them. But try and bring that closer to your normal life safely without causing harm towards others, right? Actions and reactions are different than integrating. And sometimes there needs to be a translation that doesn't involve big life decisions, but move those closer to your ideal. And that's really how we have the healing. One or the other, polarizing further. I hate this about the self-help community going like, I'm going to kill the devil in me by acting more like the angel, that's only going to repress you and drive you into misbehavior more and more. So good stuff, good discussion. If you want to continue this, man, definitely get on our Sunday calls. Men's Development Excellence is to check out for that. If that's too much for you, then dip your feet in the water. For $10, you can get on our 14-day rebuild challenge, which is a total package challenge looking at your mind, your body, your expression, your sexuality as a man, and your purpose. Deep diving into that. You get 3 calls a week for those 14 days, which is pretty cool. And man, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of community. And if that's not enough for you, give a like, comment, all those sort of things. Like, let's build this dialogue, because being the better man, being a great man, is within you and within your reach. You have the tools there. It's not always easy, right? But it's usually a simple path. And if you don't like my version, there's plenty of other people out there that'll get you there. Just got to be careful looking for them. In any case, we will talk to you soon. Have a good day.